My name is Madison Taylor, and I'm 32 years old. As a software engineer, I worked tirelessly for years to buy my dream home, a place that was truly mine. I never imagined my own family would demand I hand over the keys to my recently divorced sister Stephanie. The family meeting ambush still makes my stomach churn, but everything changed the moment my lawyer walked through my parents' front door. Before I tell you how my entire family turned against me, let me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had to stand up for yourself when everyone expected you to cave. Growing up, our family roles were clearly defined. I was Madison, the responsible one. My sister Stephanie, 3 years older at 35, was the golden child, beautiful, outgoing, and always the center of attention. This wasn't just my perception, it was reinforced daily in 1,000 small ways. When Stephanie needed money for a school trip, my parents would find it. When I needed new glasses, I was told to save my allowance. When Stephanie got a C on her report card, there were understanding nods about the teacher being too strict. When I got my first B after years of straight A's, my father asked, "What happened?" Don't get me wrong, my parents, Carol and Richard Taylor, weren't monsters. They provided for us both and said they loved us equally. But actions speak louder than words, and their actions consistently showed who came first. I learned early to be self-sufficient. I worked after-school jobs starting at 16, saved for college religiously, and graduated with honors in computer science while working 30 hours a week at the campus IT department. My graduation dinner was at Olive Garden. Stephanie, who barely finished her communications degree, got a 2-week trip to Europe. After college, I joined a tech startup and lived with 3 roommates in a tiny apartment. I ate ramen and worked 60-hour weeks, building my reputation and skills. Each promotion was earned through late nights and delivering results when others couldn't. When I turned 27, I was headhunted by a larger company. The salary increase was substantial, but my habits didn't change. I continued living with roommates, driving my 10-year-old Honda, and saving aggressively. My goal, homeownership by 30. Meanwhile, Stephanie had married Ryan, a successful real estate developer, right after college. They bought a 4,500 square foot home in the most exclusive neighborhood in our city. I still remember the housewarming party, my mother floating around, introducing herself as the mother of the homeowner, beaming with pride. When I finally reached my goal at 30 and purchased my house, a modest but perfect 3-bedroom in a nice neighborhood with good schools, the family response was tepid at best. "It's cute," my mother said during her first visit, frowning slightly at the outdated kitchen cabinets. "You can always upgrade once you're married." "Not bad for a starter home," my father added, as if this milestone I'd worked years to achieve was merely a stepping stone to something that actually mattered. Stephanie barely acknowledged it, too busy talking about the custom pool they were installing. But I loved my house fiercely. I painted every room myself, planted a small garden in the backyard, and slowly replaced the worn carpeting with hardwood floors. It wasn't just a house, it was tangible proof that I could provide for myself, rely on myself. Family gatherings continued following the same pattern established in childhood. Stephanie would dominate conversations with stories of her country club membership, her children's private school accomplishments, or their latest European vacation. My parents would hang on every word, occasionally remembering to ask me, "How's work?" Before turning back to Stephanie. Emma and Lucas, Stephanie's children, were sweet kids despite the constant spoiling. Emma, now 8, had inherited her mother's confidence and charm. 6-year-old Lucas was quieter, more thoughtful. Sometimes I wondered if he might end up being the Madison of his generation. I made special efforts to connect with them, taking them to science museums or teaching them basic coding when I babysit, which was fairly often. My mother, Carol, was the primary architect of the family dynamic. A former beauty pageant contestant who married young, she lived vicariously through Stephanie's conventional life choices. My father, Richard, was more complex, an accountant who valued hard work but who, over 35 years of marriage, had learned it was easier to go along with my mother's preferences than challenge them. "Madison is fine," I'd often overhear my mother say when relatives asked about me. "She's so independent." Stephanie, though, is having the most amazing time in the Bahamas right now. Independent. It sounds like a compliment, but in my family, it was code for, we don't need to worry about Madison. Translated, we don't need to consider Madison. This was the established order of things. I had accepted it, built my life around it, created happiness despite it. Then everything changed when Ryan left Stephanie for his 24-year-old assistant. The signs of trouble in Stephanie and Ryan's marriage had been visible for months, at least to me. Ryan started missing family events, citing work emergencies. When he did attend, he was constantly on his phone. The affectionate nicknames disappeared. They arrived in separate cars. I tried bringing it up once with my mother. Is everything okay with Stephanie and Ryan? Of course it is, she snapped. They're just busy. That's what happens when you're successful and have children. The implication being, of course, that I wouldn't understand. When the bomb finally dropped, it was nuclear. Ryan hadn't just been having an affair with his assistant Brittany, he'd bought her a condo and was planning to leave. Stephanie discovered it all through credit card statements showing matching jewelry purchases, one for her birthday, identical ones 2 days later. The family rallied around Stephanie in crisis, as I knew they would. I did too, to be fair. Despite our complicated relationship, she was my sister, and she was genuinely devastated. The perfect life she'd constructed was crumbling, and she wasn't equipped to handle it. He can't do this to me, she sobbed during an emergency family dinner the night after discovery. He can't just throw us away. But he could, and he did. Ryan, as it turned out, had been preparing for this exit for some time. The company had been restructured. Assets had been moved. While the divorce wasn't finalized yet, the initial legal discussions made it clear. Stephanie wouldn't maintain the lifestyle she was accustomed to. That's when the small requests began. Madison, could you take the kids this weekend? Stephanie has a consultation with the divorce attorney. I agreed, I loved my niece and nephew. Madison, Stephanie's a bit short this month. The legal retainer was expensive. Could you loan her $1,000? Just until things settle. I transferred the money, not really expecting to see it again. Madison, Emma's birthday party is next week. Stephanie can't handle planning right now. Could you take care of it? I spent my entire weekend organizing a unicorn-themed celebration for 15 screaming 8-year-olds. Each request was reasonable in isolation. But they came rapid fire, one after another, with increasing expectations and decreasing gratitude. The unspoken family assumption remained, Stephanie's needs were paramount, and Madison would handle whatever was necessary because Madison was independent and responsible. 3 weeks into this new reality, my mother called with what seemed like another routine request. Stephanie needs to list the house for sale, she explained. Ryan's lawyer is pushing for asset liquidation. She and the kids need somewhere to stay just until the divorce is settled. I felt the first prickle of alarm. They could rent an apartment. I can help her look. An apartment? My mother's voice rose an octave. With what Stephanie's going through. The kids have experienced enough disruption. They need stability, family. I'd take them, but your father's back can't handle the stairs anymore, and you know my migraines get worse with noise. Every excuse was technically true but strategically deployed. I tried again. There are some really nice garden-style apartments near good schools. Ground floor units available. Madison. My mother's tone shifted to one I recognized from childhood, disappointment mixed with steel. Your sister is falling apart. The children are confused and scared. Now is not the time to suggest she downgrade from a house with a pool to some apartment. Now is the time for family to step up. The implication hung in the air, unspoken but clear. If I were a good daughter, a good sister, I would offer my home. I didn't offer. But I also didn't firmly refuse. I made noncommittal noises and changed the subject, conflict avoidance being another skill I'd perfected in my family dynamic. The following day, Stephanie called me directly, unusual, as she typically relayed requests through our mother. "Mom said you might be able to help with our living situation." Her voice had the practiced fragility of someone used to getting what she wants through carefully deployed vulnerability. "I'm looking into some rental options for you," I said cautiously. "Rentals?" She sighed dramatically. "Madison, do you know what rentals cost right now? For something in a decent school district?" "I could help with the security deposit." "That's not the point." Frustration cracked through her practiced tone. "The kids have lost their home, their stability, their father living with them full-time. I can't make them live in some soulless apartment complex where everything is beige and temporary." I took a deep breath. "What exactly are you asking, Stephanie?" There was a pause, then a small, tearful voice. "I don't know. I never thought I'd be in this position. Ryan promised me the kids deserve better than." She dissolved into sobs, and I felt the familiar guilt twist in my stomach. Was I being selfish? Was my house really more important than my sister's stability during the worst crisis of her life? But something else stirred underneath, a quiet voice that had been silenced too often. This was my house. I had earned it. And the request forming in the negative space of this conversation was enormous. "I need to go," Stephanie said finally. "Emma has a meltdown every time I'm on the phone now. She thinks it's always about the divorce. Just think about what you can do to help, okay? That's what family is for." She hung up before I could respond. 2 days later, I received a text from my mother, "Family dinner Sunday. 5 p.m. Important to have everyone together during difficult times." I accepted, not yet realizing I was driving straight into an ambush. Sunday arrived with the deceptive pleasantness of any family gathering. I brought a homemade raspberry cheesecake, my traditional contribution, and arrived exactly at 5, parking behind my Aunt Elizabeth's Lexus. I was surprised to see Uncle Greg's pickup truck as well. Family dinner usually meant just my parents, Stephanie, and the kids. "The gang's all here," I murmured to myself, a flutter of unease stirring as I gathered my purse and dessert. My father answered the door with an awkward half-hug. "Good timing," he said, not quite meeting my eyes. Everyone's in the living room. The atmosphere hit me immediately, that distinctive tension of conversations halted upon entrance. Aunt Elizabeth and Uncle Greg sat stiffly on the sofa. My mother fussed unnecessarily with a tray of cheese and crackers. Stephanie wasn't there yet, but her children's tablets and headphones were neatly arranged on the coffee table, suggesting they'd be sequestered upstairs during whatever adult discussion was planned. "Madison." My mother's voice was too bright, her smile too fixed. "Put the cheesecake in the kitchen. Stephanie just texted she's running 10 minutes late." Dinner was excruciating. Conversation remained superficial and stilted, punctuated by long silences and meaningful glances between my mother and Aunt Elizabeth. My father drank 3 glasses of wine, unusual for him. Uncle Greg, my father's brother and the family contrarian, kept giving me curious looks. Emma and Lucas provided the only genuine moments, chattering about school projects and the puppy their friend had gotten. I focused on them, grateful for the reprieve from the adult tension. When we finished eating, my mother stood abruptly. "Kids, why don't you go upstairs and watch a movie on the big TV in our room? Use your headphones." The children recognized the drill and gathered their devices. "Can Aunt Madison come watch with us?" Lucas asked hopefully. "Not now, sweetie. The grown-ups need to talk." My mother's tone was gentle but firm. As soon as they disappeared upstairs, the atmosphere shifted palpably. My mother took a deep breath and placed her hands flat on the table. "Madison, we asked everyone here today because we need to discuss a family solution to Stephanie's housing situation." My stomach dropped. This wasn't a casual dinner, it was an intervention, with me as the subject. "As you know," my mother continued, "Stephanie needs to sell the house as part of the divorce settlement. She and the children need somewhere to live, somewhere stable and familiar. I've been looking into rental options," I began, but she raised her hand, cutting me off. Rentals are expensive and impersonal. The children have been through enough trauma. What they need is a home, with family. The implication hung in the air for a moment before my mother delivered the blow directly. We think you should give your house to Stephanie and the kids. The silence that followed was absolute. I stared at my mother, certain I'd misheard. Give my house? I finally managed. You mean, let them stay with me for a while? No, dear. My mother's voice was patient, as if explaining something simple to a child. We mean you should let Stephanie and the children live in your house. You're single, no children. You could easily move into an apartment. It would be a tremendous help during this difficult time. I looked around the table, waiting for someone to acknowledge the absurdity of this proposal. My father studied his wine glass. Aunt Elizabeth nodded encouragingly. Only Uncle Greg looked uncomfortable. You want me to give up my home? My voice sounded distant, even to myself. The home I saved for years to buy? The home I've renovated and made my own? It's just a house, Madison, Stephanie said, speaking for the first time. I hadn't even noticed her arrive at the table. For me, it's my children's stability. Their future. Surely that's more important than your decorating projects. This is crazy, I said, feeling heat rise to my face. I can help you find a place. I can help with deposits, moving expenses. We've discussed it thoroughly, my mother interrupted. This is the best solution for the family. You've always been so independent, so practical. Stephanie needs this. The children need this. What about what I need? The words burst out before I could stop them. My mother's expression hardened. I thought what you needed was to help your family. Isn't that what's truly important? Or is your house more valuable to you than your sister's well-being? Classic manipulation, but effective nonetheless. I felt the familiar guilt rising, coupled with a surge of anger I rarely allowed myself to express. When would you expect this to happen? I asked, fighting to keep my voice steady. My mother brightened, clearly interpreting the question as acquiescence. Well, Stephanie needs to list her house next week, so ideally you could move out by the end of the month. We thought a small one-bedroom apartment would be perfect for you. Closer to your office, perhaps. They'd planned it all out. My entire life, rearranged without my input or consent. This is insane, I said, standing up so abruptly my chair scraped loudly against the floor. You're asking me to give up my home, everything I've worked for. We're asking you to help your sister. My mother's voice rose. That's what family does, Madison. We sacrifice for each other. When has Stephanie ever sacrificed for me? I demanded. When has anyone in this family put what I needed first? That's unfair, my father interjected weakly, the first words he'd spoken during the entire exchange. Is it? I turned to him. Dad, would you ask Stephanie to give up her house if the situation were reversed? Be honest. He couldn't meet my eyes, which was answer enough. I think everyone needs to calm down, Aunt Elizabeth said soothingly. Madison, we understand this is a surprise, but surely you see this as the most sensible solution. Stephanie has 2 children to consider. And I have my life to consider, I responded, gathering my purse. I'm leaving now. This conversation is over. If you walk out that door without agreeing to help your sister, my mother said, her voice low and dangerous, you're being incredibly selfish. I paused at the threshold. Then I guess I'm selfish. As I reached for the front door, Uncle Greg caught up with me. That was a hell of an ambush, he muttered. Call me tomorrow. This isn't right. I nodded gratefully and fled to my car, hands shaking so badly I could barely insert the key into the ignition. As I pulled away from my parents' house, my phone began buzzing with texts and calls. I turned it off and drove home, to my home, the one they expected me to simply hand over because Stephanie needed it more. Because Stephanie always needed everything more. The week following the family ambush was one of the most stressful of my life. My mother called incessantly, leaving voicemails that oscillated between guilt-inducing pleas and thinly veiled threats about family loyalty. Madison, you're being incredibly immature about this whole situation. Call me back immediately. I raised you better than this. Your sister is in tears. The children are asking why their aunt doesn't love them enough to help. Your father is so disappointed. We all are. This isn't how we raised you to behave when family needs help. I stopped answering entirely after the third day, unable to bear the emotional manipulation. But physical avoidance proved impossible when Stephanie showed up unannounced on Wednesday evening. I opened the door to find her standing there with Emma and Lucas, all three wearing expressions of practiced sadness. We thought we'd come see the house again, Stephanie said, brushing past me into the entryway before I could object. The kids are so excited about potentially living here. Stephanie, we haven't agreed to anything, I protested weakly, but she was already leading the children through a tour of my home. This would be your room, Emma, she declared, entering my home office where I'd spent countless late nights building my career. We'd paint it lavender, of course, and get you a proper vanity. And Lucas, you'd have this room, she continued, moving to my guest bedroom with its carefully curated library. We'd need to remove all these bookshelves for your Lego tables. I followed helplessly as Stephanie measured windows for curtains, discussed removing my recently installed kitchen backsplash, too modern for my taste, and debated whether my primary bedroom was large enough for her California king bed. The master bath will need a complete overhaul, she announced, frowning at the rainfall shower I'd splurged on as a personal gift. I need a proper soaking tub. Stephanie, I finally managed when the children were distracted in the backyard. I haven't agreed to give you my house. This isn't happening. She blinked at me, genuinely surprised. Mom said you just needed time to process, but we're coming around. Mom doesn't speak for me. This is my home. I worked for years to afford it. I'm sorry about your situation, but I can't just give you my house. Her expression shifted from surprise to calculated hurt. After everything our family has done for you? When my children need stability? That's incredibly selfish, Madison. The same word my mother had used. Selfish. The ultimate indictment in our family lexicon. If you weren't sacrificing yourself on the altar of Stephanie's needs, you were selfish. After they left, I called my best friend Rachel, nearly hyperventilating as I recounted the entire situation. They what? Rachel's outrage was immediate and validating. They expect you to just hand over your house? Are they insane? They make it sound so reasonable, I said, pacing my kitchen, the kitchen Stephanie wanted to remodel. Like I'm the unreasonable one for not wanting to give up everything I've worked for. That's gaslighting, Madison. Textbook emotional manipulation. No reasonable person would expect you to give up your home. Period. But she has the kids. And plenty of other options. My God, listen to yourself. They've got you so twisted up you're actually considering this. Rachel's brother Nathan was a family law attorney. She insisted I speak with him, at least for perspective on the situation. I reluctantly agreed to a phone consultation the next day. From a legal standpoint, this is simple, Nathan told me after I'd explained the situation. You have zero obligation to provide housing for your adult sister, regardless of her circumstances. Your house is your property, purchased with your funds. Family has no legal claim whatsoever. His matter-of-fact assessment was strangely calming. This wasn't a moral gray area, it was black and white. My house was mine. What about the emotional harassment? I asked. The constant calls, showing up unannounced, making redecorating plans? That's trickier, he admitted. But if it continues, we could consider a formal cease and desist letter. Sometimes official legal documentation is the only thing that gets through to people who refuse to respect boundaries. The concept of formal legal action against my own family seemed extreme, but I tucked the information away, hoping it wouldn't come to that. That hope was shattered the next day when I received a call from a distant cousin. I just heard the news. So generous of you to give your house to Stephanie during her divorce. The whole family is talking about what an amazing sister you are. My blood ran cold. Who told you that? Your mom mentioned it at Aunt Susan's birthday lunch. Said you're moving out by the end of the month. Everyone's so impressed with your sacrifice. I hung up and immediately called my mother, shaking with anger. Why are you telling people I've agreed to give Stephanie my house? I demanded when she answered. Because that's what family does, Madison, she replied calmly. And deep down, you know it's the right thing to do. You're just being stubborn. I'm not being stubborn, I'm maintaining a completely reasonable boundary. It's my house. A house is just a building, my mother said dismissively. Family is forever. Stephanie has already started packing, by the way. The children are so excited. The conversation devolved from there, ending with my mother in tears, declaring, "You've always been selfish, Madison. Never thinking about anyone but yourself. I don't know where we went wrong with you." I sat in stunned silence after hanging up, her words echoing painfully. Had I always been selfish? Was I the problem here? No, I realized with sudden clarity. This was exactly how they'd always controlled me. By making me question my own reasonable needs and boundaries. By defining family loyalty as whatever Stephanie wants. I called Nathan back that evening. I'd like to formally engage your services, I told him. I need this to stop. I'm glad you called, he said. Let's set up a meeting tomorrow to discuss strategy. For the first time in days, I felt something other than anxiety and guilt. I felt resolve. Nathan's office projected exactly the sense of calm, professional confidence I needed. Degrees and certifications lined the walls, and his desk was organized with precision. He greeted me with a firm handshake and immediately got down to business, reviewing the notes from our previous conversation. So to summarize, he said, your family is pressuring you to surrender your home to your sister following her divorce. They've told extended family you've already agreed to this arrangement, and your sister has physically entered your home to plan renovations without your consent. Hearing it laid out so clinically made the situation sound even more absurd. Yes, I confirmed. And they're using every emotional manipulation tactic possible to make me feel like I'm being selfish for refusing. Nathan nodded thoughtfully. From a legal perspective, this is straightforward. Your house is your property. No one can force you to give it up. However, the emotional component complicates things. He leaned forward. Madison, what outcome are you hoping for here? I'd been asking myself the same question for days. I want them to stop pressuring me. I want them to respect my decision and my boundaries. I hesitated. I want them to treat me with the same consideration they give Stephanie. That last part might be beyond legal remedy, Nathan said gently. But we can certainly address the harassment and boundary violations. We spent the next hour developing a strategy. Nathan would draft a formal cease and desist letter outlining the specific behaviors that must stop, the constant phone calls, the unannounced visits, the false statements to extended family, and the pressure to surrender my property. Will this damage my relationship with my family permanently? I asked, the question that had been haunting me. Nathan's expression was sympathetic but direct. Madison, I have to ask you, based on what you've told me, what kind of relationship do you actually have with them now? One where your needs and boundaries are respected? One where you're treated as an equal member of the family? His questions hit like a physical blow because the answer was so obvious. No, I didn't have that kind of relationship with my family. I never had. This letter may cause temporary conflict, Nathan continued. But it might also be the first step toward establishing a healthier dynamic. Sometimes people need a serious wake-up call before they're willing to change entrenched patterns. We finalized the letter, and Nathan promised to have it ready for my review the following day. As I was preparing to leave, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Family meeting Sunday at 4. Your mother says it's crucial you attend so we can finalize arrangements. Please don't make this harder than it needs to be. I showed the message to Nathan. Perfect timing, he said. Would you like me to attend this meeting with you? The thought of having professional support during another family ambush was immensely appealing, but also terrifying. Won't that escalate things? It will certainly make a statement, he acknowledged. But sometimes a clear statement is exactly what's needed. I'd be there strictly as your legal representation, to ensure the conversation remains factual and respectful. After a moment of consideration, I nodded. Yes, I'd like you to come. Sunday at 4. Sunday arrived with a sense of impending confrontation. I'd barely slept the night before, rehearsing what I would say, imagining every possible scenario. Nathan met me at a coffee shop near my parents' house, reviewing our approach one final time. Remember, he said, you're not asking for permission to keep your own property. You're informing them of your decision and the boundaries you expect them to respect going forward. We arrived exactly at 4. I noticed only my parents' and Stephanie's cars in the driveway, no extended family this time. Perhaps they thought a smaller group would make me easier to manipulate. My mother answered the door, her practiced smile freezing when she saw Nathan beside me. Who is this? She demanded, blocking the entrance. This is Nathan Hayes, my attorney, I replied, keeping my voice steady. He'll be joining us for this discussion. My mother's face paled. You brought a lawyer to a family meeting? Madison, that's completely inappropriate. Actually, Nathan interjected smoothly, given the nature of the discussion, which involves property rights and has already included elements of harassment, legal representation is entirely appropriate. Harassment? My mother's voice rose in indignation. We're trying to help your sister. How dare you characterize family concern as harassment? Mom, I said firmly. Either we come in with Nathan present, or we don't have this conversation at all. After a tense moment, she stepped aside, lips pressed into a thin line. The atmosphere in the living room was glacial. My father sat rigidly in his armchair, looking stunned at Nathan's presence. Stephanie, on the sofa, was already in tears, whether genuine or strategic, I couldn't tell. I can't believe you brought a lawyer against your own family, she whispered dramatically. I brought an advocate, I corrected, because the last family meeting was an ambush where 4 people ganged up on me to demand I give up my home. Please, everyone, my father interjected, assuming his role as peacemaker. Let's discuss this calmly. Madison, your mother tells me you've been resistant to helping Stephanie during this difficult time. Nathan and I sat on the love seat opposite Stephanie. I took a deep breath. Dad, I am willing to help Stephanie in reasonable ways. I've offered to help her find a suitable rental. I've offered financial assistance with deposits and moving expenses. I've offered to watch the kids during the transition. What I am not willing to do is give her my house. It's just a house, my mother snapped. Stephanie has children to consider. Mrs. Taylor, Nathan said evenly, a house is not just anything. It's a significant asset, purchased through years of work and saving. No reasonable person would expect someone to surrender such an asset, family or otherwise. This is a private family matter, my mother retorted. We don't need outsiders involving themselves. When family members are being pressured to give up their property, it stops being a purely family matter, Nathan countered. Madison has engaged me to protect her legal interests, which I intend to do. He removed a folder from his briefcase and extracted several copies of a document. This is a formal cease and desist letter, he explained, passing copies to each of my family members. It outlines specifically which behaviors must stop immediately: the harassing phone calls, the unannounced visits to Madison's home, the false statements to extended family about Madison surrendering her house, and the ongoing pressure to give up her property. The room fell silent as they stared at the official letterhead. My father was the first to speak, his voice strained. Madison, is this really necessary? Legal threats against your own family? This isn't a threat, I explained. It's a clear statement of my boundaries, which haven't been respected through normal conversation. Boundaries? My mother practically spat the word. Since when does family have boundaries? We're your parents. Everyone has boundaries, Mrs. Taylor, Nathan interjected. And adults are entitled to have those boundaries respected, regardless of familial relationships. Stephanie, who had been dramatically dabbing at her eyes, suddenly erupted. This is so typical of you, Madison. Always putting yourself first. Always the cold, logical one. My children are suffering, and you're hiding behind legal documents instead of helping your own flesh and blood. I've offered multiple forms of help, I reminded her. You've rejected all of them because the only help you'll accept is me giving you my house. Because that's the only real solution, she cried. Do you know what rentals cost right now? Do you know how traumatized the children already are? Nathan calmly intervened. Ms. Taylor, Madison has prepared several reasonable alternatives that she's willing to offer. He turned to me, nodding for me to continue. I took a deep breath. I am willing to help with first and last month's rent for an apartment. I'm willing to provide a loan for a security deposit. I'm willing to spend time helping you find affordable housing options in good school districts. I'm even willing to have the kids stay with me occasionally during the transition to give you breathing room. My father looked thoughtful, but my mother shook her head dismissively. That's not nearly enough. Stephanie needs a house, not some cramped apartment. That's not Madison's responsibility to provide, Nathan stated firmly. Oh, I see how it is, my mother's voice took on the dangerous edge I recognized from childhood confrontations. When Stephanie needed braces, when she needed college tuition, when she needed her wedding paid for, that was our responsibility as parents. But now that you have a chance to help her, suddenly it's not your responsibility as a sister? How convenient. The comparison struck me as so absurd I almost laughed. Mom, there's a world of difference between helping with braces and giving someone your house. If the situations were reversed, my father asked quietly, would Stephanie give you her house? The question hung in the air. Stephanie looked genuinely affronted at the mere suggestion. That's completely different, she protested. I have children. And I have a life, I responded. A life I built carefully, through hard work and planning. I'm not setting it on fire because Ryan cheated on you. Stephanie gasped as if I'd slapped her. My mother rose to her feet, trembling with anger. I think you should leave, she said coldly. Until you're ready to be a real member of this family, to make sacrifices like the rest of us have always done for you. Mrs. Taylor, Nathan interrupted, his voice still measured but with a new edge of steel. I'd caution you against making statements you might regret. The letter I've provided outlines potential legal consequences if the harassment continues. Madison has been more than generous with her offers of assistance. I suggest you consider them carefully. Or what? My mother challenged. She'll sue her own family? Go ahead, Madison. Show everyone what kind of daughter you really are. I stood up, suddenly exhausted by the circular argument. This conversation is over. My decision is final, I am not giving Stephanie my house. The offers I've made for alternative help remain open, but I won't discuss this specific request again. As Nathan and I moved toward the door, my father surprisingly rose to follow us. In the entryway, out of sight from my mother and sister, he hesitated. Madison, He faltered. This has all gone too far. Can we talk privately sometime? I nodded, surprised and cautiously hopeful. I'd like that, Dad. As we left, only Uncle Greg's car was pulling into the driveway. He rolled down his window, taking in Nathan's presence with raised eyebrows. Brought in the big guns, huh? Good for you, kiddo. He was the only one who smiled at me as Nathan and I drove away. The 3 weeks following the lawyer confrontation passed in eerie silence. My mother didn't call. Stephanie didn't text. The family grapevine, usually buzzing with updates, went dormant. It was both a relief and strangely painful, the confirmation that standing my ground meant standing alone. Except I wasn't entirely alone. Uncle Greg called twice to check on me. And to my surprise, my father reached out to suggest meeting for coffee, away from my mother's influence. We met at a quiet cafe halfway between our homes, the awkwardness palpable as we exchanged stilted greetings. My father looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "I'm sorry about how everything happened," he began, staring into his coffee rather than meeting my eyes. "It got out of hand." "It did," I agreed, waiting for him to continue. He sighed heavily. "Your mother, she's always been protective of Stephanie. Maybe too protective. When Stephanie hurts, your mother hurts. It's always been that way." "And when I hurt?" I couldn't help asking. He winced. "You never seemed to need us as much. You were always so capable, so independent. I think we came to take that for granted." The admission was small but significant, the first time any family member had acknowledged the imbalance. "Dad, I built that independence because I had to. Because from the time I was little, it was clear Stephanie's needs would always come first." He nodded slowly. "I never wanted you to feel that way. I should have been more attentive. More balanced in how I treated you both." The conversation flowed more easily after that initial breakthrough. My father revealed things I hadn't known, how financial concerns had shaped many family decisions, how my mother's own childhood as the less favored sister had fueled her overcompensation with Stephanie, how he'd often disagreed with her approach but had chosen marital harmony over conflict. "None of that excuses what happened with the house demand," he acknowledged. "That was wrong. I knew it was wrong even as I sat there saying nothing." "Why didn't you say something?" He looked ashamed. "Cowardice, partly. And honestly, Madison, I didn't think you'd say no. You never have before. You've always been the one who adjusts, who accommodates, who makes things work." His words stung but rang true. I had been accommodating, to my own detriment, for years. "I need you to know," he continued, "Stephanie found a rental condo. 3 bedrooms, good school district. Your mother is helping with expenses. It's not the mansion, but it's nice. The kids seem to be adjusting fine." Relief washed over me. They'd found a solution that didn't involve my house. The crisis that had supposedly required my total sacrifice had been resolved through ordinary, reasonable means. "I'm glad to hear that," I said sincerely. "I never wanted Stephanie or the kids to struggle. I just couldn't be the solution at such a cost to myself." My father nodded. "I understand that now. I should have understood it then." As we parted, he hugged me, a real hug, not the awkward half-embrace I was used to receiving. "I'd like to have dinner sometime. Just us. Maybe make it a regular thing?" "I'd like that," I replied, surprised to find tears threatening. The reconciliation with my father marked the beginning of a new phase. The wall of silence from my mother and Stephanie gradually gave way to cautious communication. A text here, a brief call there. No apologies, notably, but no further demands either. Thanksgiving was approaching, the first major family holiday since the confrontation. My mother called with an invitation that sounded more like a summons. "We expect you'll join us for Thanksgiving," she said, her tone making it clear that attendance would be interpreted as a return to the established order. "I'm sorry, but I've already made other plans," I told her, having accepted Rachel's invitation weeks earlier. "But I'd be open to coming for Christmas, as long as we can all respect each other's boundaries." The phrase "respect each other's boundaries" hung between us like a gauntlet thrown. After a tense silence, my mother agreed, not warmly, but it was a start. Uncle Greg and Aunt Elizabeth remained steadfast allies throughout this transition. They invited me to their home regularly, creating a safe space within the extended family where I wasn't viewed as the villain. "Your stand has been good for the family, whether they admit it or not," Uncle Greg told me over dinner one evening. "It's forced some long overdue conversations about fairness and expectations." Stephanie and I reached a fragile truce after about 2 months. Our interactions remained more distant than before, but also more honest. Without the exhausting pretense that everything was perfect in her world, or that I existed primarily to support her needs, we found small moments of authentic connection. The children adapted to their new living situation with the resilience kids often show. Emma flourished in her new school, joining the science club, something Ryan had discouraged as too nerdy. Lucas seemed happier with the simplified lifestyle, less overwhelmed by excessive toys and activities. When I visited their condo for the first time, bringing housewarming gifts, I was struck by how much more the space felt like a home than their mansion ever had. Stephanie had been forced to focus on essentials, to create comfort rather than showcase wealth. "It's smaller, but it's ours," she admitted, watching the kids play in the modest living room. "Sometimes I think the big house was more for show than for living." It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement of growth. I would take it. As 6 months passed, I realized how much emotional energy I'd previously expended navigating my family's expectations and demands. Free from that burden, I focused on my own life with renewed clarity. I completed home improvements I'd been postponing, creating a backyard meditation garden and finally renovating my kitchen with the cabinets I'd always wanted. At work, my performance improved without the constant background anxiety of family drama. A promotion followed, with increased responsibility that challenged and energized me. Most surprisingly, I began dating again after years of focusing solely on career advancement. I met Michael, an architectural engineer, at a work conference. Unlike previous relationships where I diminished my success to avoid intimidating partners, I was forthright about my accomplishments and ambitions. Michael not only accepted but admired my independence, creating a partnership of equals rather than the caretaker role I'd been conditioned to expect. The journey with my family continued with progress and occasional setbacks. My relationship with my father strengthened through our regular dinners. My mother vacillated between grudging acceptance of the new dynamic and attempts to re-establish the old patterns. Stephanie, faced with building a life on her own terms, showed glimpses of growth alongside moments of entitlement. What changed permanently was me. I had learned to recognize manipulation, to value my own needs without guilt, to set boundaries without apology. The family pattern had been disrupted irreversibly, and while reconciliation remained a work in progress, it could only rebuild on foundations of mutual respect. As Uncle Greg put it, sometimes you have to break something completely to fix it properly. I had broken the pattern of sacrifice and accommodation that had defined my role since childhood. Whatever relationship we rebuilt would be healthier for everyone, even if not everyone was ready to admit it yet. 6 months after the confrontation that changed everything, I sat in my backyard meditation garden, reflecting on the journey. The Japanese maple I'd planted as a symbol of new beginnings was thriving, its delicate red leaves catching the evening light. This space, like my entire home, had become more sacred to me after nearly losing it, not just a house but a physical manifestation of my independence and self-worth. The transformation in my life extended far beyond keeping my property. I had experienced a fundamental shift in how I viewed myself within my family and the world at large. For years, I had unconsciously accepted the role assigned to me, the responsible one, the accommodating one, the one whose needs were secondary. Breaking that pattern was like removing chains I hadn't fully realized were binding me. My relationship with my father had blossomed in ways I never expected. Our weekly dinners became a cherished routine, creating space for conversations we'd never had during my childhood. He spoke more openly about his own regrets, the career paths not taken, the times he'd chosen peace over principle in family matters. I came to see him not just as my father but as a complex individual with his own struggles and growth. "I'm proud of you, Madison," he told me during a recent dinner. "Not just for your success, but for your courage. You stood up for yourself in a way I've rarely managed to do." Coming from him, those words meant everything. The reconciliation with my mother progressed more slowly, with steps forward and back. Some days she seemed to accept the new boundaries, engaging with me as an adult with valid needs and perspectives. Other days she slipped into old patterns, making pointed comments about family loyalty or suggesting I was still upset over that house business. I learned to disengage from these attempts at manipulation rather than defend myself. "I'm not going to discuss that," became my calm refrain, followed by a change of subject. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it led to tension. But I no longer felt responsible for managing her emotions or yielding to her expectations. Stephanie and I established a new kind of relationship, more distant than before but paradoxically more honest. Without the pretense that her needs automatically trumped mine, we found small areas of authentic connection. We weren't close friends, probably never would be, but we were finding our way to being authentic sisters. "I didn't realize how much I'd come to depend on everyone accommodating me," she admitted during a rare moment of self-awareness as we watched Emma and Lucas at a park playdate. "Ryan did everything, and when he didn't, you or mom or dad stepped in. I never had to figure things out for myself." "And now?" I asked. She watched her children navigating the playground equipment without her hovering assistance, something she would never have allowed 6 months ago. "Now I'm learning. It's harder, but maybe better." She glanced at me. "For them too." The children were perhaps the most positive aspect of this family transformation. Emma had discovered a passion for science that had been overlooked in their previous lifestyle focused on appearances and status. Lucas had emerged from his sister's shadow, revealing a talent for music and a gentle confidence that reminded me of my younger self. My relationship with them deepened as we spent quality time together without the undercurrent of familial tension. I took Emma to science museums and coding camps, encouraging the analytical mind that mirrored my own. Lucas and I bonded over piano lessons and nature walks, his thoughtful observations often stopping me in my tracks. "Aunt Madison," he asked during a recent visit, "are you happier now that everyone stopped fighting?" "I am," I told him honestly. "Sometimes standing up for yourself is hard, but it's important." He nodded solemnly. "Mom says we have to stand up for ourselves with Dad now too. She says we deserve respect." The irony wasn't lost on me, but I was glad Stephanie was passing on the lesson, however she'd come to learn it. Beyond family dynamics, my professional life flourished in ways I hadn't anticipated. Without the constant drain of emotional labor my family had required, I found renewed focus and creativity in my work. The promotion I received, to senior software architect, recognized not just my technical skills but my leadership abilities. I was leading a team now, mentoring younger engineers and finding I had a talent for nurturing others' growth when it came from genuine choice rather than obligation. Perhaps most surprisingly, I opened myself to romance after years of keeping potential partners at arm's length. Meeting Michael had been unexpected, a chance encounter at a tech conference where we'd both presented. Our first conversation lasted hours, flowing from professional topics to personal philosophies without a single awkward silence. What struck me most was how differently I showed up in this relationship compared to previous ones. I didn't minimize my accomplishments to make him comfortable. I didn't preemptively accommodate his preferences at the expense of my own. I didn't assume primary responsibility for the emotional labor of our connection. And remarkably, none of that seemed to bother him. He respected my boundaries, appreciated my directness, and never once made me feel that my success threatened his ego. "I love how you know exactly who you are," he told me after I'd explained my family history over dinner one night. "That kind of self-knowledge is rare and valuable." The lesson crystallized for me then: standing firm in my worth wasn't just about keeping my house. It was about recognizing that I deserved to occupy space in the world unapologetically, in my family, in my career, in my relationships. The house was simply the physical manifestation of that truth. The family dynamics continued to evolve, sometimes painfully, sometimes hopefully. Christmas at my parents' home was tense but civil. Easter brought warmer interactions. By summer, we had established a new normal, not perfect, but healthier than the patterns of the past. Uncle Greg remained my most steadfast ally, checking in regularly and offering perspective when family situations became confusing. "Families are systems," he explained during one of our talks. "When one person changes their role, everyone else has to adjust. Some adapt well, others fight like hell to push things back to what's familiar, even if what's familiar is dysfunctional." His words helped me understand the ongoing resistance from my mother, the occasional backsliding from Stephanie, even my own moments of doubt and guilt. We were all navigating uncharted territory after decades of established patterns. The most profound change, however, was internal. I had discovered a strength I didn't know I possessed, not just to achieve and succeed, which I'd always done, but to defend my worth and demand respect. I learned that setting boundaries wasn't selfish but necessary for authentic relationships. I recognized that helping others from a place of choice and abundance was entirely different from sacrificing myself to fulfill others' expectations. As I approach the one-year anniversary of that fateful family meeting, I find myself genuinely grateful for the crisis that forced these changes. Had Stephanie's divorce unfolded differently, had my family made more reasonable requests for support, I might have continued indefinitely in patterns that limited my full expression of self. Instead, I was forced to draw a line, to declare unequivocally, "This is me. These are my boundaries. This is what I deserve." And in doing so, I not only kept my house, I found my home within myself. I hope my story resonates with those of you who have struggled with family expectations and boundaries. Have you ever had to stand firm when everyone expected you to give in? What helped you find the courage to do what was right for you? Share your experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe if this story helped you feel less alone in your own family challenges. Thank you for listening, and remember, sometimes the hardest stand you take is the one that changes everything for the better.